Okay, now I'm all out of breath, so I need somebody to read chapter 6 through 11. And that'll get us started on our study this morning. Any volunteers? You're looking at it first, aren't you? See if there's any big words.
What do you need read?
Proverbs 6 through 11.
I'll try it.
All right, the rest of them are too lazy.
Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise, which have no captain, overseer, or ruler. Provides her supplies in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. How long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall your poverty come on you like a prowler, and your need like an armed man.
Thank you. A sluggard, that's a term you'll see often in Proverbs. It means somebody who's just lazy. And what does Solomon tell us to do for what kind of lesson is this called? An object lesson.
Tell us to go to the ant.
Go to the ant. What's that mean, go to the ant?
Well, as a child growing up looking at anthills and playing with anthills, which you really shouldn't, but if you tear down that little mound they make, they diligently build it back. You know.
Right.
So they're very industrious, they're very self-sufficient, and they're active little builders.
Right. Yeah, they are. All the time. Active all the time. And one of the things that Solomon mentions is what we're familiar, probably because of the old parable about the ant who works and provides its food. And what's a grasshopper do? He just hangs out and plays all the time. He never makes any preparations for the future. And I remember listening to, my goodness, my mind is not working at all. Who was just here and talked to us about the diabetes? Ken, yes? Oh, I'm glad it's the rest of you too. It's not just, what's that? Ellis, yes, Ken Ellis. I've known him for years and I just could not pull up the name. Ken Ellis. He used this passage in talking about their study from Proverbs as it affects health, and especially for people who are diabetic like he is. And he said, ants are always on the move. You never see ants just hanging out, just sitting around. As a matter of fact, I remember one comedian made the observation, like Billy said, if you tear up that ant, I can't get away from the microphone, but if you tear up the anthill, as people, we would go, oh man, look what happened, this is horrible, what are we going to do now? Well, the ants don't do that, they just start building back immediately. There's no expression of disgust, or no ant is saying, I'm not doing that again, I've built that thing 3 times. They just start to work and they do it again. They're always active, they're always doing something, they never seem to get discouraged, they just keep on going. And Solomon says, look to the ant. Sluggard, observe her ways and be wise. What does it mean when it says they don't have a chief? Is there any application for us?
They're independent of one another.
Okay, they're independent, but do they work independently?
No, they work in unity, but they're very independent.
Yes. Who has to tell them what to do? Nobody. Nobody has to tell them what to do. They know what to do and they do it. If you have a group of people, not so much in the church, but in the world, if you've got employees and you're not giving them instructions and guide as to what to do, what are they going to eventually be doing? Probably a lot of them. Sitting around, doing nothing. But not the ants. And so when Solomon tells us to go to the ants, there are really a lot of lessons to learn that are the opposite of being a lazy sluggard. She makes preparations for the future, gathers provisions in the harvest. So they're looking ahead. Lazy people tend not to look ahead, but...
And Marty, that may be a tribute to them why they're still here, because they do provide for themselves.
Yes.
Those that do not provide for themselves or build their house or take care of their provisions, usually winter and dry blow away and die.
No, we have to observe. We have to observe. We got to keep the observation in mind. God made the grasshoppers just like he made the ants. And the grasshoppers are designed to have a cyclical lifespan. They die off at the end of the summer. Of course, we understand that. But still, it's almost as if God made them that way so that there would be a lesson for us as we looked at the grasshoppers and then compared them to the ants. At least it's a pretty good observation that's been made down through the ages and teaches us a pretty good story. Solomon doesn't point us to the grasshopper here, but he does point us to the ant. And then in the latter part of this, look at verses 9 through 11. How long will you lie down, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber. What's it mean, folding of the hands? Like fold your hands on your chest to rest. You got to do something with your hands. Have you noticed that? You ever wake up in the middle of the night and your hand's asleep and there's an arm in front of you? Oh, whose arm is it? You see, you've done it, haven't you? So the sluggard is wise. He folds his hands properly. That's not what this is talking about, but you see the idea. A little folding of the hands to rest, and when you do that, your poverty is going to come like a vagabond. Your need like an armed man. In other words, it'll be hard to resist when your poverty comes because you've made no preparations. You haven't looked to the future. Well, that's one text. There are some other ones. Look at chapter 10 and verse 26. Some of these will seem like repeats, but the fact that these passages are in here tells us something about it. Somebody read 10:26.
As vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so are sluggards to those who send them.
Vinegar to the teeth. What's that mean? What happens when you get vinegar in your mouth? Have you ever had vinegar in your mouth?
It's a bad taste in your mouth.
Oh yeah, you get a bad taste in your mouth. Oh gosh, it's like now you got a film on your teeth. How about smoke in your eyes? It burns. You tear up. You got to get away from it. You got to get out of it. That's what he says. A lazy person is like to those who send him. What's involved here?
The point is that neither one of those are productive.
I'm sorry?
Neither one of those are productive.
Neither one of them are productive.
So vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, nothing's going to come about other than something
Not pleasant,
pleasing, not pleasant.
not comfortable.
And so you send a sluggard to do something, you're not going to get much out of it.
Okay, you've got a mission. You need somebody to take care of. The worst person to pick is somebody who's lazy. Dayton, you had a comment.
Well, I just said deeds left undone. The first line is inheritance. Both of them were inheritance. And then the result is duty that was assigned is never achieved.
Because the fellow is a lazy sluggard. 13:4. Need a reader. No big words in this one.
The soul of a lazy man desires and has nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made rich.
All right, now we've got some contrast. What happens with the sluggard?
He craves more. The version says craves.
You ever had a craving that you just couldn't satisfy? Maybe whatever you wanted wasn't available.
He craves and gets nothing is what it does.
Now there's a frustration. You have a strong desire for something. You really anticipate a flavor or whatever it might be, but you can't get your hands on it. But what if you're a diligent person?
You gain your riches and become fat.
See, here's where I become an object lesson. Wouldn't it be nice if every fat person was that way because they were diligent? I better get off that. I'm going to get myself in trouble. The soul of the sluggard craves, but he doesn't get anything. There's no satisfaction for the sluggard, but the diligent people are made fat. In other words, they are satisfied. So if you want satisfaction in life, don't allow your satisfaction to be to sit around and do nothing. If that's what you crave, then you're going to wind up craving. Get yourself busy doing something good, because God wants to make you prosperous. He wants to reward you. And I don't mean to preach this gospel of prosperity, that if you're a righteous person, you're going to have lots of money and good health. But God wants good things for us, and one of the ways to get good things is to be diligent about whatever we do. So, get busy. Chapter 19 and verse 15. Laziness casts into a deep sleep, and an idle man will suffer hunger. And then drop down to verse 24. The sluggard buries his hand in the dish, but will not even bring it back to his mouth. Is there anything to learn in that? You get that picture? It's kind of a gross picture, isn't it? What's the dish he's putting his hand into?
It could be food, it could be work, it could be anything that he does, but he doesn't ever bring it back to complete the process.
Okay. I think the idea is the picture we're supposed to get is a food dish. Even to satisfy his hunger, he's too lazy to even bring the food back up to his mouth. He buries his hand in the dish, and then he doesn't even pull it back to his mouth because he's too lazy. Oh, I don't want to exert the energy to pull the food back to my mouth. It reminds me of another comedian I heard. He was talking about this thing about, you've probably seen it in grocery stores. It's peanut butter and jelly in the same jar. He said, how lazy are we getting these days? So somebody standing around said, I want a sandwich, but man, I don't want to have to open 2 jars.
That's actually convenience, Marty.
Yeah. I bet he's got a jar of that stuff. There is a difference. There is a difference. But you see the idea here, somebody who's got it right there, but they're just too lazy to even take advantage of it. And how many times have you seen people like that? Or maybe you've been that person at one point or another. You've had the opportunity, and it was right there for you, and you just blew it because laziness, irresponsibility, didn't have enough sense to care. Whatever it was that contributed to it, you missed out. And that's what Solomon is talking about here when he talks about the lazy person or the sluggard. And then you go back to verse 15. Laziness casts into a deep sleep, and an idle man, once again, will suffer hunger. Maybe part of the reason he suffers hunger is because he's too lazy to even pull his hand out of the food dish and bring it back to his mouth. Solomon, as you can see, as he speaks through the Spirit of God, doesn't have a whole lot of consideration for laziness.
Well, Marty, there's another part of that, the man that will not work, don't let him eat.
Yes.
He won't work for it. There's a parallel here that you'd have to do something for what's been afforded you here. I mean, a lot of people think I can just go through life, live off mom and dad or grandma or whoever, but we have to make responsible and do something with our lives, and in this sense here, work, eat, provide for yourself, provide for others, that you're responsible for.
Some of you all help me out here who have a few more years than I do. When I was a kid growing up in the 60s, I don't remember anybody ever using the phrase work ethic. Does anybody remember that being used in the 60s?
You didn't have to, because that generation already had the work ethic. They
Okay.
worked.
I think that was the point. I never heard the phrase because most everybody, and I'm not saying there weren't any lazy people in the 60s. Oh boy, you go back to the 60s, everything was great. Everybody was ambitious and there wasn't anything wrong in the world. I know it wasn't like that, but I think there is something to the fact that I don't remember hearing that phrase until just recently. Now we've started talking about a work ethic because more and more people are enjoying leisure and they want to carry leisure to work with them, and it doesn't work. You got to make an effort to get something done. Comments, observations, questions? All right. Chapter 20, verses 4 to 5. Somebody read that for us, please. Who will do that? Chapter 20, 4 through 5. Or 4 and 5. Okay, Mark.
The sluggard does not plow after the autumn, so he begs during the harvest and has nothing. A plan in the heart of a man is like deep water, but a man of understanding draws it out.
Do 4 and 5 really go together? I think they do. I mean, the sluggard's really only talked about in verse 4. But the reason he's talked about it in verse 4 because he doesn't do what verse 5 teaches. He doesn't plow after the autumn. Why would you plow after the autumn?
It's useless because the season's over. You know, your time for the seed to germinate, die, grow, and bring forth fruit is too late.
Okay.
Depends on where you're at, but in this part of the country, it's too late.
But it sounds like there's something bad about not plowing after the autumn. Why would a farmer plow after the autumn? Is there any reason to?
You ready for the next season?
Get ready for next year.
Okay, you're already thinking and planning ahead, getting ready for the next season. So when spring comes around, well, you've already it's already been plowed over once, and you don't have to do nearly as much work.
There you go.
Okay? Give the leftover vegetation time to deteriorate. What does it do when it's buried in the ground like that? Feeds the soil. Instead of laying on the top of the ground, just going to waste. You plow it under, and it feeds the soil. And we have to remember also, they didn't have the efficient machines that we have today. We drive by a wheat field today, and it just looks beautiful. And other kinds of crops that are just lined up. I don't know, when I was a kid especially, we'd take drives and you'd go through and, you know, the visual effect when the rows are going perpendicular from the highway and you're driving past it. Oh, I thought that was so neat to see those rows and just, it's there for just an instant and it's gone, and it's there for an instant and it's gone, and it's, okay, enough of that, Marty. But they didn't have that then. It was much more organic, and you had a lot more stuff that you could plow under. Yes?
Marty, a lot of people don't realize that in the fall of the year, all of the insects that have plagued your garden throughout the summer are trying to find a place to preserve themselves through the winter, and they go down into the ground. And if you plow that field or your garden, then that exposes them to the harsh elements.
Ah.
They have as many bugs, hopefully the next summer.
I need to write this down. See, this is where we get, what's that passage in Proverbs? In the multitude of counselors, there's wisdom. We're learning all kinds of things about farming here, why we should plow after the autumn.
That's gain of knowledge.
Yes, it is. Write it down. Preserve that. Hang on to it. But the sluggard doesn't do that because he doesn't have a plan. Verse 5 talks about somebody who's making a plan. A plan in the heart of a man is like what? Deep water. Deep water. What does the idea of deep water convey? And Dayton, you don't have to answer that particular question, but
Well, deep water would indicate careful fall or penetrating inside. But what I was raising my hand about, there are actually 3 stages involved, and one passage was not noted that relates to 3. One is someone that makes no plan. Another makes plans but just sit there and then do nothing about it. And the third stage is that after we make our plans, we still need God's wisdom to carry them out. That's where verse 21 comes in. Many are the plans in a man's heart, but the counsel of the Lord are by the counsel of the Lord it will stand. And hence, no plans, plan and do nothing, make our best plans, we still need God.
yes. And you could back up to chapter 16, I think it is, in verse 9, where he says, the mind of man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. I believe God intends for us to look to the future and make plans for the future, but at the same time, he's letting us know, you make your plans, but I'm going to be directing your steps. And if you think about it, could there be a better circumstance for us? We make our plans, and while we're making our plans, God says, now I'm going to direct your steps. Well, who else would you rather have make your steps? I've tried directing my own life a time or two. Doesn't work very well. But every time I follow God's plan, okay, it comes out pretty good. Billy?
I was going to talk more about this deep water. Deep water is established water. It's going to be there for a while. So this plan has been established in this guy's heart. It's going to be there a while. Shallow water runs off, dries out, and evaporates quick. And it's kind of a comparison of the two.
Right.
Are you planning for a deep-rooted crop here, something that will last for generations? Or are you for the moment, and you're going to just, even this guy here is not even taking advantage of the moment in planning, and yet he's going to starve and have nothing.
Typically, we plan for things we really enjoy and look forward to. If you got something coming up like a vacation, isn't it fun to make plans for your vacation? Used to be you get the atlas out, and you sit down with your atlas and your little ruler, and you project, okay, this one says that an inch equals 50 miles, and so you're plotting, and you got that diagram in the back, not a diagram, but a scale that says mileage from one city to the other and all those things. You're plotting out your trip. Now you just get on MapQuest and hit a button. I tell you, drive this kind of car, go this fast, stop at this McDonald's, whatever. But planning is fun if what you're planning for is something you anticipate with pleasure. What if it's something that's not fun? Is it any less important to plan? If two people call me and they say, Marty, we want to get married. I say, all right, come on in, let's talk about this. What do you think we talk about?
Interest, where'd you meet?
Commitment.
Commitment.
Yeah, you're getting it. Listen to the people who are saying this.
What's your different outlooks on life?
Yeah, all these things, you got to talk about this, because if you're going to live together, you got to look ahead and you got to say, okay.
Compatibility.
Yeah, and it might be something as simple as, who's going to decorate the living room? I want antlers. Well, that's on use antlers and all of it. I don't want the antlers in my house. I want some flowers and little wreaths and dried stuff that falls on the floor, whatever. And you have to plan. You have to put in people's minds, if they're not already thinking this way, you got to put in their minds, plan ahead for living together. Not only plan for you living together, but plan ahead because one of these days the Lord may bless you with a child. How are you going to raise that child? What do you think about disciplining a child? How should that be done? What do you think about disciplining a child? Well, I think it should be this way. You better agree on it. You better plan ahead and agree on it before you have that child, because it could be a mess if one believes in one way and one believes in another. What are you going to do with your money? How many checks you going to have, or checkbooks, checking accounts? What am I trying to say here? It's all things that has to be planned ahead. And the more you plan, the more you learn about one another in the process of making the plans. It's the same thing with taking a vacation. You find out what each other likes and doesn't like and what you gravitate towards. So there's all kinds of benefits to making plans, but lazy people don't do that. They just kind of let things happen. So. All right, chapter 21. Wait a minute, did we read verse 13 in chapter 20? Do not love sleep, or you will become poor. Oh, that's a good one. Open your eyes, and you'll be satisfied with food. So is it wrong to enjoy sleep? No. You better enjoy it. But like everything else, just a little moderation. I like donuts, but not 20 at a time. Okay, that's a lie. I would like 20 at a time. But I don't eat 20 at a time because I believe in some degree of moderation. 15's enough for anybody.
Key word is love.
Yes.
That means you want more of it than you need.
And if you have a desire for something like sleep, that doesn't mean because you love it, you can't control it. You can control anything you want in your own life. Just because, now you might not be able to control whether or not you love it, but you can control whether or not you give yourself to it. We do that all the time with everything. You ever wanted to kill somebody and held back? Sure, we do that all the time. You ever want to say something and held back? Maybe not so much. But you probably appreciate when you do.
Marty, this person had work ethics, earlier you talked about that word. Back in the 60s and earlier than that, my grandparents, when they would work, they worked from sun up, sundown. A lot of people here will remember that. You know, probably for $1 a day or whatever it was. They didn't have to worry about sleeping when they went to bed. They slept well.
Yes.
You know, they wasn't worried about everything else going on in the world. They provided for their family. Rest was very comfortable. They slept well. They were re-energized at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, got up and started all over again. 3 o'clock in the morning.
Well, hold on to that thought and go to Ecclesiastes. Let's see, now that I've said that, let's see if I can find it here real quick. But Solomon said in Ecclesiastes that the sleep of the working man is pleasant. This is chapter 5, and verse 12. Sleep of the working man is pleasant, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich does not allow him to sleep. And I don't know that it's the full stomach so much as it is the full stomach without, there's no activity there, there's no labor. And I don't know about you, but it works for me. If it's time to go to bed and I've got a full stomach, I'll hit the street and I'll do a mile. And if I just walk a mile, oh, I feel so much better. Now I'm ready to go to sleep. It's just a little bit of physical activity. It's marvelous the way God has designed the body. He designed it to move. He designed it to do things. He didn't design it to sit around and do the things that we do so much today, because so much of our lifestyle today is oriented towards sitting around. Even driving. I like to take road trips, but physically, it's hard on you. All right, where are we here? 22:13, Proverbs 22:13. Somebody read that one for us.
Sluggard says, there's a lion outside. I shall be killed in the street.
Now, why would you say something like that? It's an excuse. What's out in the street besides the lion? Work. Go out there and get a job. Oh man, there's a lion out there. I could be killed. Give me a break. I think this is what we call back in the hill country a hyperbole. It's an exaggeration to make a point. I don't know that anybody would really say, oh, there's a lion in the streets, but it's an exaggeration. This is how crazy some people will get, and how, to what lengths they will go to avoid actually doing any kind of work. I remember a couple of guys, some while I was in the service and another guy when I got out and had a job, and I would notice them hiding out, and they had to work harder at avoiding work than they would have had to work if they'd have done the work. And they were always complaining about the day being so long. When's this day going to be ever over?
The true worker never has enough time in a day to get done.
Exactly. And it always seems like the day goes by fast. And it doesn't matter what, you could be sacking groceries. But if there's a lot of customers, hey, the day goes by fast. Doesn't matter what you do, you stay busy, the day goes by faster, and when it's done, you feel a whole lot better.
The time is advanced. The person wants to know when's payday and when he's going to get the first raise.
Yep.
They're about to work, it's not there. All they want is when payday comes, they want that check and they want to do it as quick as they can, all they can get out of it.
And here's
The
a,
reason I retired.
just getting tired of seeing all that, did you? Yeah. Does God have a way to bless those who work over those who are lazy? He does. He has a way to bless the diligent over the lazy. And it doesn't matter if you're signed up to get the same paycheck. You might get the same paycheck, but it's like the prophet said. You'll put it in a pocket with holes in it. God has a way to bless us when we are diligent.
I think it was put in the scriptures, Marty, where it says, be satisfied with your wage. If you hire out for a certain wage, it don't make no difference what the other guy is making.
Right?
You hire out to do a job, you do that job, all you can expect is what you hire out to get it for. That time is gone. That flew by several years ago.
Seems like that problem has escalated too. How much did a ball player make in 1970?
Under 100,000, probably 30,000.
I saw a chart that somebody had made. It was on Facebook, and I don't know who put it on there. Maybe, did you put it up there, Bonnie, that chart with the states that said what the highest paid person in that state did, what their job was? It really was kind of eye-opening. Most of the highest paid jobs in all 50 states were sports coaches. Really? Sports coaches? I mean, all the important things that somebody could do in the world, and if you can coach a college football team or a college basketball team, you're going to make more money. Now, I don't have any problem with coaches making money, but I think that says something about us as a culture when some of the most highest paid people are...
We have police and fire and teachers and that have to subsidize their income because they're not making enough to feed their family.
Yeah. And you might ask, what does that have to do with the study on laziness from Proverbs? Well, laziness is about misplaced priorities. Laziness is not it's not about somebody who says, here's what's really important and here's what's not. And I need to involve myself in what's really important rather than what's not. And as a country, I think as a culture, we're making some mistakes along those same lines. Although we might be more diligent in some of our mistakes, so we're not lazy, we just got some wrong priorities. 24, verses 30 through 34. We might get through most of these. Chapter 24, verses 30 through 34. Anybody want to read that?
Past life goes the sluggard by the vineyard of a man like a tent, and behold, it was all overgrown with thorns, and the ground was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. Then I saw and considered it. I looked and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man.
All right. This time Solomon gives us a little more of a picture, but he brings back some of the same things he's already taught us about, like the folding of the hands to sleep and your poverty coming like an armed man. But in this case, he's walking past the field of a sluggard. What's he see when he walks past that sluggard's field? Ruins. It's grown up. It's got stuff growing that shouldn't be growing there because it ought to have a crop or something. Or it ought to at least be plowed under so that even if it's thistles and thorns that he's plowed under, they can at least be nourishing the soil. It's interesting to me when you read verse 30. He says, I passed by the field of the sluggard, and then in that wonderful Hebraic doubling, it says, and by the vineyard of the man lacking sense. Who's the man lacking sense? The sluggard. So to be lazy is to lack sense. It's not smart to be lazy. It is smart to be diligent. That's where wisdom is. It's in diligence. Comments, questions, observations? I know you've done this. You ever drive by somebody's house, look over there, and you say to yourself, how can those people live like that? That's the picture Solomon's giving us here. Except there's probably somebody driving my house saying, how can that guy live like that? So we got to be careful, but we need to be diligent. Chapter 26, verses 13 to 16. Who wants to read this for us? 13 to 16, chapter 26. Mark.
The sluggard says, there's a lion in the road. A lion is in the open square.
What's the old line? There's a lion in the streets. What is that? Are you the one that said, Wilma, it's an excuse? Who said that? Yeah, it's just an excuse. There's a lion in the streets. You can't go out there. The lion in the streets. What else is out there? Bobby, Billy? Work. Work out there. That's why you want to say there's a lion in the streets. I'm not going out there. What does the sluggard do with the dish? Oh, wait a minute. We're not there yet. You get the picture in verse 14? It's like a cartoon. Like a door swinging on its hinges, except it's not a door standing up swinging. How's the door situated? It's laying down. Flopping over in bed. Just flopping back and forth, laying in the bed. What's he say? A little folding of the hands, a little slumber, a little sleep. He buries his hand in the dish. We've seen that before. It's like, okay, I want to remind you of a few of these things so you don't forget them. God doesn't waste time in the Bible or space either. He doesn't repeat things just to take up our time and fill space. If you see something repeated in Scripture, it's probably something that God wants us to take notice of, perhaps more than we would have otherwise. And so he repeats it. I know as a parent, I've had to repeat a few things to our children. Perhaps you have as well. And Solomon is repeating things to his, God through Solomon is repeating things to his children. Verse 16. What do you think of verse 16? What's the sluggard, what's the lazy guy doing in verse 16?
He's a know-it-all.
Okay, he sounds like a know-it-all, but what's his knowledge all about? Laziness?
The ability to get out of work.
Okay, the ability to get out of work and the ability to justify himself. You see that there?
Sense of self-importance.
Exercise is how to promote his lifestyle.
Yes. To justify what he does. He promotes it, he defends it. This is why I do it, because, man, there's a lion in the streets. You'd be an idiot to go out there. Wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can give a discreet answer.
Probably something significant about 7 men. That term 7 is used as a picture of completeness over and over in Scripture. So here's a complete source of wisdom, and he's smarter than that.
Right. He's smarter than that in justifying his own laziness, his lack of diligence. That's what he's smarter at. He's smarter at justifying what he shouldn't be justifying at all. What's the first verse of the Bible tell us? You know it. In the beginning, God created. What did he create? The heavens and the earth. What did he do the next 5 days? Or the first 6 days, I guess I should ask it that way. He continued to create. Every day he created, and he created different things on different days, and there was always an order to what he created. What did he do on the 7th day? He rested. Now when it says he rested, it's not the same kind of rest like we have. It's simply a cessation of activity. And he did that according to Moses. When God gave Moses the law of Sinai, he did that as a sign for us that we should work for 6 days, and on the 7th day, we should rest. Rest is good. Work is good. Everything is good in balance. Everything is good at its proper time. Isn't that what we learned in Ecclesiastes? There's a time for everything. Everything needs to be done in its time. There's a time to work, and there's a time to rest. When you read about Jesus in any one of the 4 Gospels, what's he doing? He's always working. Always working. What's the one thing you know about him when he was a child?
He was about his father's business.
He was being about his father's business. He went to the temple with his parents. They left him there. When they came back, what was he doing? He was asking questions. He wasn't just sitting around, playing around. He was asking questions. And when they asked him, what are you doing here? He said, well, don't you know I need to be about my father's business? So when we look at God in the beginning, and from that point, we don't see God being a slacker at all. People say, what's God doing? Did he just sit up there in heaven? And, are you kidding me? Haven't you read any of history? See what's going on? Everything God has to have a hand in. Is there any person on the planet, he doesn't know what's going on in their mind, exactly what's going on in their mind? Any person on the planet that he doesn't know what's happening in their lives?
It'd be hard not to if he's directing your feet and your path. You know, if he's directing the path you're on, he knows exactly what's going on in your life.
Now, he's not trying to teach us that we need to be busy, so busy like him that we exhaust ourselves. But the thing is, he's not exhausting himself. He has an unlimited resource of power and energy and ability to do what he does. But what he does is teach us. Use what I've given you in like manner to get some good done. Kendall? No, wait.
Here.
Carrie, yeah.
I don't know about other people, but all the verses about the sluggard, it steps on my toes every which way I can think. I mean, it really, I'm kind of squirming in my seat this morning about it. But and I have a footnote on verse 30 in chapter 24. It says, instead of sense, it has a footnote for the word heart, lacking sense or lacking heart. And I guess sometimes that's what I feel like my issue is the state of my heart at that time, you know. And our culture, we're called a lazy nation in general. So maybe that's why I'm feeling so uncomfortable about these things, because I'm really guilty. But I think sometimes the lion that we say is in the streets, I don't know if this is a proper comparison, but is our feeling of entitlement. You know, I can not work and do such and such because, you know, I work the last 2 days really hard. So I'm entitled to sit here and do nothing, or those kids are driving me crazy, so I'm entitled to not whatever. So a lot of feeling of entitlement is kind of sometimes my line in the streets. So I don't know, that may not be a proper comparison, but I'm just thinking along the lines of
I think it's a good comparison as long as we keep a balance. Don's got a comment. I want to get to Don's comment before
I wanted to say I agree wholeheartedly. That's why I got married, because my wife won't let me be a sluggard.
Yeah. There's nothing a woman hates more than to see a man doing nothing. Well, thank you for your comments and everything this morning. Appreciate your attention. We'll come back to another section of Proverbs next week.